Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the public meeting of the Toronto Community Housing Corporation Board's Tenant Services Committee meeting to order. I'm Mary Hogan, the chair of the Tenant Services Committee. Welcome to today's hybrid committee meeting, which is taking place in person at City Hall and virtually via WebEx. Let me begin with an acknowledgement that the lands that each of us is on as we hold this meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And it is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We also acknowledge all treaty people, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or in generations past, and those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. And before I get started here and get into the, I suppose, meat of the agenda, and I know we have quite a number of deputations today. I'd just like to make a few comments, and they're about the wonderful tour I had of the East Region. I had that on April 15th, in fact, just a couple of days after the last board meeting. And I must say, I felt quite uplifted after that tour. I saw so many of the tenants who were engaged in all sorts of activities to better their communities. And I saw a staff who was working collaboratively with the tenants to make those things happen. And I want to thank all of the tenants whom I met, and I don't have their names, but I would also, in addition, like to thank the staff who facilitated that tour. And I'm going to start with a special shout out to Gail Johnson, who may have already retired. I know I was told when I was on the tour that she was about to retire very soon. But she was my tour guide, and she has been with the corporation for decades. And she was, even after having been here for decades and decades, she was full of enthusiasm and she was full of pride for what was happening in the buildings and what was happening with the tenants. And believe me, she knew everything about every single building in the East Region. So I just want to say particular thanks to her and to bid her a good retirement. She was quite amazing. And I also then want to thank the other staff members, and I will name them, who made my tour so exciting, and it was really exciting. And they are, and if I get any of the names not quite right, my apologies, okay. Arsema Burhane, Ashley Fontaine, Alex Yeaman, Maurice Nibbs, Minatala Ali, Carrie Becksteed, Temeskin Gebra McCall, Bob McDonald, Marion Rumes, Alfred Yorgi, Sean Brosnan, Moroni Schifferall, Leslie Skelton, Lester Lagadon, Eugene Tapek, Dana Williams, Jack Nishati, Han Zeng, Tamart Biru, Lilibeth Virnes, Darren Dansell, Elvira Rapada, Floramado Guira, and Amina Ibrahim. So a big thank you to everyone. Okay. Now, during today's public session, there are 6 reports, I believe, brought forward for information. And first, I will ask for approval. No, I'm going to ask if there's a conflict. Yes. First, I'm going to ask if any members of the Tenant Services Committee have a conflict of interest, and if they do, I'd like to know the nature of the conflict. Anyone with a conflict? I'm not seeing any hands, so then no conflicts of interest were declared for any agenda item. All right, and then I'm getting into the approval of the public meeting agenda. All right. And at this point, I believe, without even having to ask, because there are deputations on just about, well, I think on everything. So I believe all items are going to be held, except for Item 4, which is the confirmation of the public minute meetings, and they could be held, but at this point, the others are being held, and business arising from the public meeting minutes. So I guess what I'm asking for is for an approval of the 2 items that are not, in fact, already being held, if that makes any sense. Can I have a motion? The only 2 are business arising, confirmation of the public meeting minutes from the last meeting, and business arising from the public meeting minutes. Okay. Does anybody wish those 2 items held? Debbie, yes.
No, I don't mean to hold them. I'm moving that we accept the minutes with those 2 items.
Okay. All right, then there is a motion, and can I have a seconder? Dan? All right, all in favor? All right, then, so I guess it's just items 4 and 5 then that are in fact approved, and then we'll go on, okay, to the other items. All right, moving forward then, we're looking at item 6A, which is the SERV, Operation Service Delivery Strategy. And I know that we have some deputations on that. I'm just trying to find my deputation sheet here. Pardon me? Just Catherine? Okay. Hang on a moment. All right. Okay. And the first and actually there is a written deputation, but the only verbal deputation is by Catherine Wilkinson. Catherine, oh, there you are. All right. Good morning, Catherine. Okay.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
All right. You have the floor, so to speak.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Tenant Services Committee, staff present, and tenants at the meeting and online. I do want to acknowledge and thank you, Madam Chair, for talking about Gail Johnson, who was instrumental in many tenants who got engaged in tenant engagement, including myself. And it was through her empowering tenants, believing in tenants, that change was possible and we could make change in our communities, that I'm still here before you today. She has outlasted, I think, the majority of employees at Toronto Community Housing with 39 years.
That's right.
Under
Yes.
her belt, right? So amazing. Thank you for shouting out to Gail.
Okay.
Okay. As to the SERV report, it indicates that, funding was provided in the 2026 operating budget. So I'm not sure what the cost was for this particular strategy. It is a well-intended and ambitious plan. Tenants have been on the receiving end of many such changes over the years that were also intended to improve tenant service delivery. Keywords leave me questioning things like structural approach to organize, align, and communicate how frontline staff and centralized service delivery is driving outcomes that matter most and impact our tenants. There's not a lot of changes in the service delivery itself. We are bound by the Residential Tenancies Act and, of course, the shareholders agreement to deliver these services. We are just grouping the services under the 4 pillars. So who are we communicating this plan with? The staff responsible or tenants on the receiving end, or both? The usual corporate speak, strengthening service delivery, workforce capacity, those are terrifying words for tenants, as it usually entails some sort of staff shuffling. Service optimization, is that for staff convenience, or will that be an inconvenience to our tenants? Standardized performance brings to mind the importance to create and publicize standard operating procedures. Currently, only staff are aware of what their standard operating procedures are, so tenants have no idea if staff are delivering as expected. So please clarify what full building cleanouts means and how that affects our tenants. We've known for years the tenant service hubs failed to improve tenant-facing services and have been waiting for management to address this issue. We decentralized tenant-facing services to improve service delivery on the front lines for tenants, and then over time, we continue to claw back some of those services and centralize them. Every single day, we don't address the failure of the tenant service hubs is another day some 90,000 tenants do not get the daily tenant-facing services they deserve. And that should not be acceptable to anyone. I'm all for improving service delivery. It's what's not in the report that concerns me. So something feels off. Perhaps it's the transparency on how we will operationalize this strategy. Thank you. We're there?
But I'm there. Are there any questions from members of the committee with regard to what Ms. Wilkinson has had to say? No? Nadia, do you have some comments?
So through the chair, certainly echo the deputant's concerns about ensuring that we implement effectively and consistently, given that there's been lots of starts and stops in the past. The intent of this strategy is very much for us to pull together our services and be able to articulate them more effectively so that we could have conversations with this committee and the board around some of the great work that individuals like Gail Johnson are doing in the communities. I think there's times that there's a bit of a gap in how we talk about our work and the importance of focusing on things that are going well and also things where we need to improve. And this strategy attempts to pull things together to better create discourse with the board around issues that are deeply impacting our frontline staff and our tenants. With respect to the tenant service offices or hubs, we are looking to bring a report back to the committee ideally in July for us to talk about the way forward, and so we'll work through those issues. We do have a presentation on SERV that my team will be giving. I see Director Douglas's hand is up, so I don't know if you want to take that question before we start the presentation.
Sorry, say that?
Director Douglas had a hand up. I don't know if we want to take that before we start the presentation.
Thank you. Debbie?
Just a quick follow-up to something Catherine mentioned, because Catherine is absolutely right. I think as a board, we also came to the conclusion that the tenant hubs were not working the way we had anticipated. Will this new procedure system address some of those concerns in terms of the hub review?
So through the chair, that is the intent of the new proposed strategy. We've done extensive tenant consultation as well as staff consultation, and so we will be presenting an updated model to the committee ideally in July.
Thank you, Nadia.
Okay. Anything further than you say is a presentation now?
Yeah, so we'll start our presentation. So as this committee knows, the operations division is responsible for a broad range of services that directly impact our tenants, their households, their buildings, and their communities. To date, we have reported on these services through individual reports that, while detailed, do not always give the committee a clear, connected picture on how our frontline work is driving outcomes. SERV, our operations delivery strategy, is intended to change that. It organizes the work of operations into 4 focus areas: supporting tenants, empowering households, repairing and maintaining buildings, and vitalizing communities. More importantly, it establishes a structured reporting framework that will give the committee consistent, outcome-based updates on operational performance, including where we are succeeding and where we need to focus on improvement. After today, we will continue to work through the details with our staff teams as well as tenants with the hopes of sharing this service strategy with the board in the fall. I would like to ask John Ankow, Senior Director of Operations, to walk the committee through the framework and what you can expect from our reporting going forward.
Good morning, committee members, and thank you for the opportunity to present on SERV, which is our operations delivery strategy. It is through this lens that we organize, deliver, and report back on all the work that the division performs on a day-to-day basis. I'll jump straight into the SERV framework. This placemat on the slide gives a full picture of how SERV is structured. As the COOs mentioned, we've organized our work into 4 areas of focus, primarily organizing the work and aligned it with the distinct groups that we serve, those being tenants, households, building, and communities. This is intentional, and we believe that success at each area builds on the one before it. Every focus area is tied to a specific strategic outcome, whether that be to improve tenant experience, housing stability, maintain buildings, and thriving communities. And also, this is intentional so we can measure the work that matters. Over the next few slides, I'll give the committee members an overview of each of these areas to highlight some of the key services initiatives, and outcomes associated with each of the work. Our first body of work under SERV is supporting tenants, and this is intentionally where we start because everything we do ultimately ties back to the individual tenant experience. Our objective here is straightforward, and that is to deliver responsive and tenant-centered services, especially for those navigating complex needs. As part of our work in this area, we're continuing to strengthen complex tenancy supports, streamlining transfers, accelerating accessibility modifications, deploying rapid rehousing, and targeting high-needs communities, all focused on improving responsiveness and access for our tenants. Our second body of work is empowering households. This is where we move beyond the individual tenant experience and focus onto housing stability, keeping people successfully housed. We're working proactively on arrears management, repayment agreements, and evictions prevention so households can stay stable over time. As part of this work, we're continuing to expand the partnership with Ojubuyi, strengthening arrears collection, leveraging our partnerships with both Wood Green and the Rent Bank, reviewing RGI eligibility, and addressing underhoused tenants, which are all aimed to reducing disruptions and keeping households stable throughout our housing portfolio. The third body of work under SERV is focused on repairing and maintaining buildings. And this work is about ensuring that we're delivering clean, safe, and properly maintained homes across the residential portfolio. We're strengthening our annual unit inspections to catch issues as they arise and address them in a timely manner. But we're also expanding our semi-skills training program, which involves building in-house capacity with our staff to ensure that we're providing services in a timely and effective manner. As part of the work under this pillar, we're continuing to strengthen the AUIs, expand the training program for our staff, but also optimizing some of our internal support structures for staff, such as the maintenance dispatch, which involves dispatching work to our tenants and staff, also delivering full building cleanouts in a manner that is effective and targeted. All aiming to drive better building conditions and efficient service to the portfolio. The last body of work in the SERV framework involves vitalizing communities. This takes us beyond the households and onto the communities and the impact of the work that we do. Our focus here is primarily fostering safe, connected, and engaged neighborhoods through targeted tenant engagement, distribution of local funding, and strategic partnerships that delivers key services to the different groups across our communities. As part of this work, we're strengthening our Engage Together program, continuing to deliver the LIFT funding, advancing social procurement, and expanding the iHelp for health and wellness throughout the communities, all building safer and more connected neighborhoods. I'd also like to point out that while the SERV framework guides the activities of the Operations Division today, it also helps us to focus on our work moving forward. We're equally focused on the future, on making sure that we're adapting to the emerging needs of our tenants and communities. On the tenant side, we're taking initial steps to develop the tenant portal to improve access and make it easier for our tenants to interact with us digitally. From a service perspective, and this was brought up by the Deputation, we're continuing to look at our resources and making sure we're optimizing the deployment of resources throughout the portfolio to make sure that they're impactful and targeted to the service we provide. And last but not least, we're investing in our workforce throughout the Operations Division, making sure that we're taking a thoughtful approach to building up our workforce to ensure that they have the right skill set to deliver the services we provide on a day-to-day basis. Now, looking forward, what this means for the committee and the board is, as part of the implementation of SERV, is we're establishing a reporting framework that provides this committee and the board a more consistent and focused updates on how our work is unfolding. As part of future reports, you can expect to receive a performance summary organized around these 4 focus areas of people, households, building, and communities. As well, we'll be complementing each of those reports with spotlight stories. So these would be stories that bring the information to life, highlighting both the success and challenges that we face as we deliver our services on a day-to-day basis. As well as we continue to move forward with SERV, we're establishing a regular cadence of reports on when you can expect to hear about this work. Quarterly, this committee and the board will receive an operational health report, and that report will be aligned again to the service themes with aligned performance measures, insights, and spotlight stories. And annually, as part of this body of work, we're aiming to deliver a strategic reflection report that takes a deep dive on the work conducted by the Operations Division over the past year, but also assess the progress as we move forward in addressing our strategic priorities. As next steps, as the CEO has elaborated, we will continue to work with management in this committee and committee members to implement the SERV framework. Later this year, and particularly October, we'll deliver the first operations health report, giving you the first quarterly view of the performance against our service delivery priorities. And last but not least, at the end of the year, in December, we will be advancing a report to this committee and the board that presents the first annual strategic reflection report that encompasses all of the services we provide as a division over the last year. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and happy to take any questions, comments from the committee members.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Let me just say, I can't see the online.
It's me, Mary, Debbie.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that very comprehensive report. I'm actually going to try and steal your idea for another initiative in terms of SERV and how you've organized it. One of the written deputations talked about the need for clear metrics and for the metrics to be developed in collaboration with tenants. Do you have any plans for that process, especially for your annual impact report? I'm very glad to see that it's an impact report. How will you tell the impact that the services are having on tenants' well-being or tenant satisfaction?
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. So part of the parallel work that's happening as we refine the SERV framework is we're also working with our management at the moment to reconfirm the service metrics, the KPIs, that we will be aligning with each of these 4 service areas. In addition, I think historically we've done a great job of reporting service metrics and targets. What we're looking to do and include in this body of work is capturing tenant sentiment. In the past that we've had initiatives and programs that aim to capture tenant sentiment. The aim is now to broaden that and expand that in a manner that allows us to capture tenant sentiment as a start across each of these 4 areas. So for example, within the repair and maintaining building pillar, we do have an existing program called Closing the Loop. So this, in short, this is a program where we poll tenants who recently had in-suite repairs conducted by vendors on their experience with the vendor and the completed work. So that's an example that we're looking to leverage, but also looking to take that and scale that to the other 3 areas where we're working with tenants and staff to capture their experience as it relates to consuming the services that we provide. So there is active work underway to do that.
Okay.
And through the chair, I would just add, we are looking at bringing back, we had something called service quality indicators that we've used in the past, where we were able to pulse check with tenants on our different areas of the business. And I think this strategic framework allows us to ask those questions in a very deliberate, directed way that will allow us to modify services where we need to. So the hope is that we will bring that back online as well to help inform the strategy as we go forward.
Thanks for that. And I'm assuming then that in the report, we will also see disaggregated the experience of various tenant groups. So for example, we will know the impact that the services are having on tenants living with disabilities, as an example. Geographic reporting as well, the difference in terms of tenants' experience in the West as opposed to Central, as an example. Are those part of your plans? In reporting?
So through the chair, absolutely. On the geographic side, I think as it comes to the other identity-based data indicators, I think that would be part of the overall identity-based data strategy that we're moving forward with in 2027. But certainly for 2026, we'll be looking at having an understanding of geographical feedback, because that's how we would conduct the surveys and the feedback loops. And we're able to identify the specific areas depending on the community and what they want to see. So I would say future state is something we'd want to weave in, but in the immediate, we're looking more at geography to start.
Okay. I'll pay attention to that.
Excuse me, Marcel, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm just wondering, is there a possibility of actually just doing a couple of test runs on this new strategy with the various groups?
So through the chair, we could certainly work with some groups and some communities to refine how we measure it. The idea here isn't that we're doing anything net new in terms of the work. We want to be able to pull together different parts of the work to ensure we're creating a holistic tenant experience. And so the framework allows us to talk about the work and understand our work a little bit differently. So it's less about piloting the actual work, but more about how we speak about the work and understand the work. But certainly Director Charleroi, happy to reach out offline to figure out if it makes sense to work in a couple of targeted communities to refine the measurements and how we speak about it, because I think that's going to be really important for us to do.
Thank you.
Anything further? Or, Marcel, is that it? Yeah, your hand is still showing, so I want to make sure you don't have any other questions. No?
No, I have no questions. The computer is like having some kind of attitude right now.
Okay, fine. It's not having a good morning, right? Okay, anything else? Now, my understanding is at this point, we're simply receiving it for information, and we will, having heard some of these comments and deputations, it will come back, but all right. All right, so then I'm asking for a motion at this point to receive the SERV Operations Service Delivery Strategy Report for information. All in favor? Sorry, moved. Dan is moving it. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Marcel, all in favor? All right, then the motion is passed. Good, thank you. All right, then, moving on to item 6B, which is the biannual Community Safety and Wellbeing Strategy update. And there are some deputations on this. Both written and verbal deputations, and the first one is Miguel. Good morning, Miguel.
Good morning, Chair. On this item,
Hey,
allow me to connect my laptop.
take your time.
Technology.
I feel the same way sometimes, Miguel. So.
No, that's not the one. Okay, I got it. Hopefully. There you are. Can you hear me? Perfect.
Yes.
So thank you for the opportunity to speak on this item. Thank you to everybody who is working behind to make this community safety and well-being strategy a success story, not just another one. It goes into a pile of files. And I'm looking at Director Chabanes. Thank you so much for your kind work behind the wheel. So this report does not have any financial implication or there's no new funding. Last year, when I came to speak on this item what is this page? Oh, here it is. All right, so on this slide, outcome area 2, tenants engaged in safety. On box 2.4, it says that we will implement a tenant-led conflict resolution pilot program. I am really excited about this because it's never been done before. Most of the time, when we tenants have a discussion, an argument or misunderstanding, it seems that we always go directly to the nearest tenant service coordinator or community service coordinator with our complaint, but we don't listen to both sides of the coins. We ended up only listening to one person. So you feel that you are becoming tools of angry tenants. So let's put it that way. But implementing a resolution process is the way to go. So I was approached by the neighborhood group, which they were interested in having a conversation about how you can solve your conflicts in your building. And I said, well, fantastic, but in the current time, I'm waiting for a resolution for my ongoing accommodations for soundproofing. I said, so I put it on the back burner. Maybe one day I will revisit that file and maybe we can discuss having conflict resolutions, which is good. to reduce the state of violence in the buildings. So another item that I wanted to show you guys is that, hold on a second, I'm having a problem with my iPad. There is a fantastic video of my counselor, Chris Moyes, who explains to us what is a hard house by the government of Ontario. So I tried to copy the video so I can show it to you guys, but I'm having trouble with my technology. So maybe one day. It's located at 5AA, I believe, 5AA Parliament Street. No, 580 Parliament Street. So in the report says we're going to be strengthening with partners. And this one is the example that the Wellbeing Project should contact to ensure that those residents who are ready to quit drugs are able to be helped through the model, which is the province Ontario, which is also what we used to have called the safe injection sites, and they have been replaced. And I want to close my deputation by saying that we still have noises in the buildings, and my hope is that I can finally myself be able to move to my unit. I couldn't move in since May the 1st because the floors and the walls haven't been soundproof. I'm supposed to move last May the 1st and still waiting. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys can help. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Miguel. Any questions of Miguel? No? All right. I'm going to go on then to the next deputant, who is Catherine Wilkinson. No, there she is. Okay. All right.
Yes.
Catherine, go ahead.
Good morning, me again. On page 3 of this report, the CSU acknowledges that the foundational drivers for change began with the final report on the CSU review conducted by the city. And as we know, our tenants welcome the opportunity to participate in the CSU review, desperate to see change in the manner in which CSU provides services. For several years, we know that Toronto Housing and CSU prioritize the Violence Reduction Program, the VRP, in specific identified communities. But during this time, the safety issues that matter most to tenants were not discussed. So in essence, if safety is never an agenda item, it cannot and will not be discussed. We took away the tenant voice to speak before the TSC or the board on safety issues in their communities for the past several years. We can't change behaviors by intimidating and threatening tenants into compliance. We need to get at the root causes, and this is where we can identify and address community by community what is needed and how we go about affecting change, not the usual one-size-fits-all approach. We know what matters most to tenants. Their issues are not a one-off. There are an everyday occurrences that our tenants put up with. Site staff will say, nothing they can do, call CSU. Noise disturbance, barking dogs, loud music, someone parking in your spot and enforcement shows up hours later. Racism, intimidation by tenants and guests and visitors. Tenant disputes, antisocial behavior, and drug activity, to name a few. Every day in our communities, not discussed and not reported. With a perception of indifference and no response, tenants have come to accept this is how it is, and no one will be resolving their issue. As tenants often say, that's housing. As indicated at the last TSC meeting, Nadia indicated that the CSU resources are limited to the communities with the highest needs. So while we're suggesting we're going to do a pilot program, and that's often very helpful, much like the VRP program, CSU resources will once again be dedicated towards those high needs communities they've identified. tenants were told on multiple occasions the CSU review final report that they had participated in would be made public. The final report was done in February. The CSU report, as we talked about, is the catalyst for change in operations and service delivery. Tenants did not anticipate the final report on the CSU review would be sandwiched between two other safety reports in December. The CSU report review was not even identified on the agenda. This is not just wrong. It's a great disservice to tenants, potentially violates the shareholders' agreement, which directs Toronto Community Housing to consult with tenants on issues that impact their tenancy, policies and procedures, and changes in services. We talk about a positive tenant experience. Well, tenants stepped up and they participated and they waited and waited some more for Toronto Community Housing to honor their commitment to provide the final CSU review publicly. And you didn't really do that. Our tenants deserve better. Management can, however, correct this oversight. As a suggestion and a courtesy, I would recommend that the CSU review as a standalone item be put on a future TSC agenda. This will ensure Toronto Community Housing honors their commitments to tenants, to transparency, so they can see their feedback reflected in the final report and the recommendations that were made by the consultant to improve community safety service levels and service delivery for tenants. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Catherine by committee members? Dan.
I've often wondered if you're working with the tenant advocacy, the TAC committee, that has received reports and very detailed meetings and feedback on this issue and many others. Have you interacted with TAC at all on this?
So
thank you. Oh. Is that for me, the deputant?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So actually, it's a great question. Thank you, Director Jan. I actually was on TAC when the CSU review came through, and they did talk to us about the review, and the TAC as a whole was consulted on. So there's a classic example that the TAC never received the final report either. I'm just asking for transparency, where tenants can actually see themselves and the feedback they provided, that it was considered and captured in a report, and they should have the right to see the report.
I agree. Everyone should see the report. All I'm pointing out is I attended the TAC meeting, I think in January, maybe February, where this was gone over in great detail, and much feedback was received from the TAC members at that. So I'm trying to see if there is a disconnect, and if there isn't, that's great. If there is, I'd like to see that cured.
Thank you. Nandi, did you have a comment?
So through the chair, to Director McIntyre's point, we did bring it back to TAC with not only the findings from the CSU review, but also the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. We also were able to share information at our TCATs. So that's our community action tables, where we shared lots of information about the way forward, as well as the feedback that we heard from the review. We did table this as a public agenda item in our December board meeting, inclusive of the CSU review in its entirety. We've had multiple discussions, certainly with the board in camera and in public session on the review. There was no intent to hide the contents of the review. It is part of the public documentation. The focus was to move forward with the strategy informed by the review. So you'll see in the community safety and wellbeing strategy, much of it is informed specifically by the findings that we heard from that review that was conducted, and so we continue to reference it as a document that informs our work as we move forward.
Is that helpful, Ms. Wilkinson?
That's lovely. Thank you for that. But you didn't post it transparently On the contrary, the CSU review was sandwiched between two safety reports. It was not a public agenda item. So how would tenants know that the CSU review was out? We didn't post it on the website. We didn't have it as a public agenda item. And it's great that you talked to the TAC and to the TCATs, but that's not the only tenants who participated. And I think it's just for transparency, just honor your commitment. And, we don't have to do anything different. I understand there's a strategy in place. I'm just saying honor the commitment to be transparent with that report as a public agenda item.
Sean, I think you have a comment.
Thanks. Through the chair, I just want to comment that to ensure that board and committee members understand, TCHC has been entirely transparent about this. The CSU review is publicly available. It's on our website right now. It was part of our public agenda items that came through both Tenant Service Committee and the Board of Directors. It received significant discussion when it was brought forward for board discussion. It also received significant tenant consultation and feedback through a variety of different areas, both during the conduct of the CSU review itself, as well as during the development of the subsequent community safety and well-being strategy, which was presented alongside the CSU review when it came forward for discussion in December. So I certainly would hope that board members understand that there has been both significant consultation with tenants and full public disclosure of the CSU review and the supporting strategy going forward.
Anything further? All right. I know that, sorry, were you about to say something, Ms. Wilkinson? No. I know that there is going to be a presentation, I believe.
We'll be doing a short verbal kind of overview. Okay, I think there's one more deputation.
There is, I know.
Okay.
I'm just to respond to Ms. Wilkinson. And I think that moving forward in terms of community safety and well-being strategy, that a lot of that is obviously based on the CSU review that was done and will be referred to, I would expect. So perhaps I'm looking for a compromise in some ways here, because to have to have an agenda item with just this, without looking at the ongoing strategy that's being developed as a result of the CSU, takes us sort of back in a way as opposed to forward. But maybe it's something that we can take a look at this point and see how we can incorporate your concern into future discussions so that it can certainly be more transparent. That's all I'm suggesting.
Mary, I'm wondering, given that there is a tenant engagement newsletter coming out, I think, in Q2, if there should be an article that flags the report to remind tenants that it's on the website and they have access to it. That's another communication out to tenants around the report.
That would be, Ms. Wilkinson, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, so on the contrary, Sean, your December agenda, if you go back and look at it, there's the safety wellness strategy. Sandwiched between that is the CSU review, and at the bottom is the safety and wellness presentation. The agenda item is safety and wellness. It does not say that it's the CSU review. And I can appreciate, and I will actually apologize, I wasn't aware that it was posted on the website. However, that's just not good enough. This came to the board, and tenants have the right to speak to it, to either this committee or to the board. And you took away our voice and our opportunity to do that. And I'm telling you now, just putting you on notice, if you will not make this a public agenda item, that I will be registering an official complaint with the ombudsman for this company to do so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right, thank you for your deputation, and I think that we'll consider how we can move forward while at the same time taking into account your concern. We have another deputation from Victoria Ojubuyi, if I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and that's online. Is Victoria online? Okay, she is on WebEx.
Good morning.
Oh, here we are. Okay.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sort of, not very well.
Good morning.
That's
Can
better.
you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Good morning, Chair, member of the committee, staff, and wonderful residents that take the time to attend this meeting this morning. I'm back again, and this time is to ask for your support. Safety concern is still ongoing in our building, and we've promised a meeting. And I recently found out about safety audit meeting in other building, and such meeting will be benefit to our community just to have everybody to voice the critical issue. That way, solution could be created. But what brought me here today is something more serious. Wellness check for the seniors and vulnerable residents, including myself. During COVID, we had the wellness check was introduced, which was so beneficial, just receiving the call and say, oh, are you okay? And recently, I've been talking to a lot of seniors. There's increased fall, there's flooding, and the response time is next to none. I've asked as emergency go between, stay downstairs, wait for the fire people to arrive because not everyone have access to the building. But in the last 2 days, there was a flooding in a unit across from me, and I wasn't aware of it. I thought it was from my unit, so I woke up with water all over my kitchen. I cleaned it. Is when I went outside and I realized the water was coming for another unit. Call it in, involve the tenant line, the staff mop the hallway, because the resident have the risk of falling, and I was worried. I request a knock to make sure the resident was okay. We're not allowed to do that. I did that. I found out the tap was left on since previous night. For me, this is regular occurrence, like having resident fall in the tub 3 days later, and I've connect as many people to resources. I've go through the telephone merry-go-round with security, tenant line. Oh no, it's not our department, it's not our department, but I'm resourceful. I connect with community support for this, for the senior and vulnerable resident. But that's still a concern when there's a flood, like who have access to the unit to ensure residents are okay, like they're not in the tub unresponsive. Is it security? Is it the after hours? So there's still that challenge. What I'm requesting today is that safety audit meeting that been promised to us since 2023. Is it? Yeah, 2023 to actually happen. And also like find out what is the flood protocol when something like that happen. Who is our first line of contact to actually be on site to assist resident instead of resident taking it upon themselves to do so. Yeah, wellness check, reintroduction of wellness check is crucial. I have one for myself, and I'm responsible for 25 people in the community and 10 people in the building. So it's like I need support. I need support from community coordinator for our community to continue to help residents as best as we can. Thank you so much for this opportunity and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Are there any questions by the committee members of the deputy?
I actually have written, then I believe it's the same deputant who sent it in writing. How feasible is it for us to reinstate the wellness checks?
So through the chair, we conducted extensive wellness checks during the COVID period. It was predicated on us redeploying multiple corporate teams because we kind of stopped non-essential service delivery. And so it was thousands of phone calls daily. It took multiple weeks. It did actually lead to some significant findings in terms of being able to connect tenants to resources and supports. It would require a massive focus and shifting of resources to do it. Approximately 20 to 25% of our tenants were identified as vulnerable because we kind of had to do a check on the back end to see. And so we made multiple phone calls. So if we were planning to do that consistently, we would have to look at a different resource model to actually service that need. So although we appreciate it is an ongoing need, it's a bit of a struggle for us to maintain that on an annual basis even. So I would say it's possible, but it would require additional staffing resources.
So it's not very feasible for TCHC staff to be the front line on this. I'm wondering, I guess it's an ongoing conversation with some of our service partners who work with seniors especially, but also people with disabilities and other vulnerabilities.
Absolutely, and I will also add that we do have individual tenancies and tenants that we work with through our access and support and our high needs teams, and so there are tenants that we're engaging with regularly and checking in on them. I think any sort of massive scale based on criteria, that is where we wouldn't be able to do that given current resources.
Sorry. Thank you, Nadia.
Marcel, see your hand is up.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, aside from the wellness check, which is very important, I'm also wondering is it possible, like, if people that are on Ontario disability or any kind of like social assistance programs, if that program would assist them with like a fall detector, like I have this here and it's a lifeline. And so it detects everything that happens with me. And I'm not sure if like ODSP or like personal insurance would cover those things, but I think that would be something that would be very beneficial for people in the community. I know it's beneficial for me, but it only works if you wear it. But it's just a thought. You can program everything. You can tell the people that this sends the call to, like different instructions to contact a family member or CSU or somebody else to come. It also gives them information like how to access your lockbox, all these different things. If you have pets, any kind of concerns or, like just things like that. It's just very helpful. That's it. Thank you.
So through the chair, I think that's a great suggestion, Director Charlebois, and we will follow up with our respective colleagues at Toronto Employment Social Services to determine if we can get that expense included. And if so, we can certainly look at proactive communication with tenants to let them know that this is a possibility. So we'll take that offline.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, Nadia, I think.
So in December 2025, the board approved the Community Safety and Wellbeing Strategy, a single organization-wide framework that consolidates our earlier place-based safety work, including the Violence Reduction Program, under 5 outcome areas. This is the first biannual implementation update. 2026 is intended to be a building year. We are testing the model through regional pilots in the East, Central, and West before scaling further. Pilot locations have been identified, baseline data has been analyzed, tenant engagement is underway, and local action plans are being developed. The pilots will be tested and structured based on prevention, follow-up, and coordinated service integration in real operating environments so we can learn first and then implement widely later. I will turn it over to Senior Director of Community Safety, Vidal Chavans, who will do a bit more of a detailed walkthrough.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadia. And through the chair, before I get to my comments about the report, I do want to just respond to a couple of things in the deputation. So, Miguel, the tenant-led conflict resolution model is something that we're very, very excited about. It actually came from a tenant, so we're working with that tenant as well as a couple of community partners to get the pilot underway. So expect to see and hear some updates coming in the next few months. Catherine, you mentioned the violence reduction program, and I know that that program has been kind of folded, but I do want you to know that the work is not going away. It's being absorbed into the community safety and well-being strategy. That said, in terms of the discussion of the CSU review and the subsequent development of the strategy and the implementation plan, we have been trying to ensure that we engage with community. I personally went to TAC and talked about the CSU review. We've recently wrapped up town halls in some of the neighborhoods that are seeing the most challenge across the TCHC portfolio. So I do want you to know, if you have not had an opportunity to discuss the report, it is available on the website. And then Victoria, following up on your question about the SEPTED audit, I will find out the last time a SEPTED audit was done at that building, and we'll be ensuring that that is done. We do SEPTED audits on a cyclical basis, but we can certainly move them up if a need is required. And I do want to also mention, you are asking about who to contact if you have any safety concerns. If they're not immediate, there are community safety advisors, and I'll make sure that you know who the community safety advisor is for your building, as well as building staff that can assist if you do feel like somebody needs to be checked on immediately. The other thing I'll mention is we had a conversation just yesterday with a community partner, the Distress Centers of Greater Toronto, that have a check-in program, and it's free of charge. And so we're trying to figure out ways that we can partner to hopefully work with Distress Centers of Greater Toronto to make that program available to individuals across the TCHC portfolio as well. All right, so now to the report. Before you begin your discussion of the item, I just want to take a few minutes to frame what this report is intended to communicate. At its core, it's an early implementation update on the CSWB strategy that was approved by the board in December. It's not yet a results report in the sense of saying this is what has changed across the portfolio. Rather, it's a report that explains how we're beginning to move the strategy from a board-approved framework into practical implementation. The main shift we're describing is a move from a primarily reactive safety model toward a more coordinated, prevention-oriented, tenant-informed, and place-based approach. That means we're not only looking at how CSU responds to incidents, but also how the organization identifies repeat issues earlier, coordinates across divisions, engages with tenants, works with partners, addresses environmental safety concerns, and follows up in a more consistent way. A key part of the 2026 approach is the use of 3 regional pilot areas, one in the east, one in central, and one in the west. These pilots give us a way to test the operating model in real communities before we attempt broader scale-up. The pilots are not meant to suggest that these are the only communities with safety needs. Rather, they're the first places where we're testing the routines, governance, data, engagement, and follow-up model that can eventually inform a more consistent approach across the organization. The baseline data in the report is also important. So the 2025 calls for service data give us a starting point. It tells us where demand is concentrated, what types of issues are recurring, and how the demand profile differs by region. But that baseline shouldn't be read as the only measure of success. Over time, we're going to need to combine call data with tenant feedback, repeat incident analysis, milestones of implementation, activity with our partners, environmental actions, and evidence of better coordination. I also want to emphasize that this strategy does not replace, as I mentioned before, the high needs work or the violence reduction work or other place-based initiatives that have already been underway. The intention is to bring those lessons into one organization-wide community safety and well-being framework so that our work is less fragmented and more consistently planned, measured, and reported. The report also acknowledges that there are real risks. This is a significant change management effort. It requires clear ownership, cross-divisional accountability, strong communication, and realistic expectations about what can be achieved in the first year. So in plain language, the report is saying we've started the implementation, we've identified where we'll test the model, we've established an initial baseline, we're building the measurement framework, and will come back with clearer reporting as the work matures. The goal for this year is to establish a credible operating model, learn from the pilots, surface barriers early, and ensure that any future expansion is based on need, readiness, and capacity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Any questions of Vidal and Nadia by committee members? No? All right.
It's good.
Sorry.
I was just saying it's a good report. Thank you.
Yes, I think it's an excellent report. All right, then if I could have a motion, please, to receive the biannual Community Safety and Wellbeing Strategy Update and to forward it to the board for information. I have a Debbie moving it. Do I have a seconder? Marcel, all in favor? Okay, great. Approved then. Okay, and so it will be received and forwarded to the board for information. All right. Next item is the update on availability of naloxone in our communities. And we have deputations on that. Again, Miguel, you're number one. Okay.
Hello, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you, Director Chabanes, for that response. That was very honest from you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right, so naloxone. So last week, we have a meeting in Regent Park of the Safety Network meeting, and we were giving a green report about the number of deaths by overdose. Police, Toronto Police, Community Safety Unit, they said, that most of these deaths are happening in several locations across the Toronto area. And during the discussion, we were thinking how we can help to alleviate this problem, to reduce the number of deaths. As I mentioned in my last deputation, I carry around 3 naloxone bags attached to my bike, and you can see on the picture. I call myself the naloxone fairy, and I deliver and I provide to anybody who wants it. The problem is, my friends, is that many of the new drugs that have synthetic drugs, mostly horse pills, veterinary products, you can use 3-4 times naloxone. You will never resuscitate that person unless you're a trained person to provide a CPR. Now, if you see on the picture, on the step number 4, it says open airway, 2 breaths. No, I'm not going to kiss nobody or try to resuscitate anybody because of the dangers of giving somebody mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. So, however, the Regent Park Clinic says that there is another alternative, Miguel, to provide CPR and you don't have to be in touch mouth-to-mouth. It's called the emergency resuscitation bag. And it can be found in most community health clinics. The goal of the community is to have this in TCHC buildings, and TCHC staff or trained staff, residents, most of us, we have received CPR training over the years, can help to keep a person alive while an EMS ambulance arrives. But a report says only TCHC staff will be provided with the training. The other alternative, as Catherine mentioned in her last deputation, is the use of defibrillators. And it would be nice to know where we keep those defibrillators in TCHC buildings. So there are 2 ways to deal with this problem, because it's not just naloxone. It is the drug availability out there that is mixed with byproducts that really is difficult to bring someone to life if they have overdose. So that is the terrible situation that we have in our community. And as I mentioned before, Chris Moyes, my counselor, the chair of Toronto Public Health, has provided this cool video where it explains how is the hot house model, how does it work in Toronto Center. So yeah, AEDs or the resuscitation bags, in my opinion, are the available solutions at this moment. And so if you have any questions, I'm here to answer. But thank you anyway to everybody who's working to distribute these products. Unfortunately, not enough is not enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Are there any questions by committee members of Miguel before I go to the next deputation? No? All right, then. Next deputant is Lorna Antwi. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Okay. Good morning, Chair, committee members, staff, and fellow tenants. I will be speaking on the agenda item TSC 2026-14, availabilities of naloxone in TCHC communities. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today regarding the report on naloxone access in Toronto community housing communities. My name is Lorna Antwi. I am a registered Toronto councillor candidate for Humber River Black Creek, Ward 7. While I appreciate the work that has gone into this report, I humbly disagree with the recommendation that this report simply be received for information. The report itself has serious concerns that have been raised by tenant, frontline workers, and members of this committee. These concerns include limited naloxone access during emergencies, uneven service coverage across communities, and pilot projects that do not necessarily reflect locations where overdose incidents are most frequent. The report acknowledges these challenges, yet the proposed response is more study, more consultation, more investigation, at a time when communities across Toronto continue to experience the devastating impacts of overdose crisis. I do not believe this response goes far enough. Naloxone is a life-saving medication. During an overdose emergency, every minute matters. Delay in access can mean different between life and death. One of my primary concerns is TCHC's reliance on external partners to distribute naloxone. Community agency and outreach workers play an important role, and their work should be recognized and supported. However, we must ask ourselves, what happens when outreach workers are not on site? What happens during evenings, weekends, holidays, or overnight hours What happens when a resident witnessed an overdose and cannot wait for mobile clinic or outreach team to arrive? Access to life-saving interventions should not depend solely on the schedule and support of service agencies and Toronto Public Health. The report also raises concern about equity. It acknowledges that access to harm reduction services often depend whether a community has an anchor agency or partner organization present. As a result, some tenants have regular access to naloxone and harm reduction supports, while others have very limited access. This is not equitable. A tenant should have the ability to access life-saving resources, should not be determined where they live within the TCHC portfolio. Every resident deserves the same opportunity to protect themselves, their loved ones, and their neighbors during an overdose emergency. Another concern is the absence of a clear timeline. Throughout the report, we hear that staff are investigating options, exploring opportunities, pursuing discussions, and continuing further research. While those activities are important, residents deserve more of an open-ended consultation. Where is the timeline? What are the performance targets? And when can tenant expect expanded access? Without measured goals and implementation dates, it can become difficult to hold ourselves accountable for progress. I am also concerned that the report appears to be a place of significant emphasis on limitation of passive naloxone distribution models without fully examining successful examples that have already been existing elsewhere. Across Canada and internationally, jurisdictions have implemented naloxone vending machines, public access to harm reduction kiosks, community naloxone boxes, and peer-led distribution programs. These initiatives have demonstrated that innovative approaches can increase access while maintaining safety and accountability. Rather than dismissing these options prematurely, I believe TCHC should actively explore and pilot them in communities experiencing highest rates of overdose incidences, as it's currently in progress. Most importantly, we must listen to the voices of the tenants. The concerns raised by members of the committee are not theatrical. They come directly from lived experience. They come from residents who see the impacts of the overdose crisis in their buildings, communities every day. They come from people who understand where the gap is because they live in those consequences of those gaps. Their voices deserve to carry equal weight alongside administrative, legal, operational considerations. In closing, I respectfully urge the committee and TCHC staff to move beyond simply receiving this report for information. The report confirms significant gaps in access, acknowledges inequities in service delivery, it recognizes overdoses hotspot within TCHC communities. The next step should be action. I urge TCHD to establish clear implementation timelines, expand naloxone access immediately in high-risk communities, strengthen peer-led distribution models, and return with a concrete action plan for direct naloxone distribution. LIVE depends on timely access to harm reduction resources. The cost of delay is simply too high. Thank you for your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much for an excellent, you can stay there just in case anybody has questions, all right? And I'll just note for the record that you also put in a written deputation as well, okay? All right then, do any committee members have questions of Lorna? No questions? All right.
Not of Lorna, but of the staff, probably of Nadia.
Okay, thank you. Hang on then. Thank you, Lorna. Thank you. And we're going to have some further discussion now. All right, perhaps before that, Debbie, maybe I can ask Nadia to report, and then we'll take questions, okay? Because I too have some questions, but yeah. Okay.
So thank you, Chair. So through the Chair, this briefing note responds to the committee's feedback on the naloxone availability report presented at the April meeting. The committee raised 3 concerns: that naloxone access for tenants remains limited, particularly in emergency situations, that pilot sites did not align with actual overdose hotspots, and that harm reduction coverage across the portfolio is uneven and too dependent on where partner agencies happen to have a presence. We have heard those concerns, and this report outlines how we're responding on 2 fronts. First, we're expanding and strengthening the existing partner-led model. We are working with Toronto Public Health and our community safety unit to realign services to overdose hotspot locations informed by incident data and frontline input, rather than simply where agencies already have offices. We have already expanded the pilot to include priority high needs sites in the central region, particularly 220 Elk, and we are scaling peer-based supports. Second, we're working on the approvals needed for TCHC to distribute naloxone directly to tenants. Because naloxone is a behind-the-counter drug, that would require authorization that Toronto Public Health, under the Ontario Naloxone Program, could give us. We're already in discussions with Toronto Public Health about what's needed. There are still some legal, administrative, and operational requirements to work through, including storage, training, and liability. And we'll come back to the committee with a clearer update once that work is further along. The intent is not to choose one path over the other. We need strong partnerships delivering services now, and we're also building toward the ability to put naloxone directly in the hands of our tenants. Happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Nadia. All right, Debbie, I know you have a question.
Yeah, Nadia answered most of them actually in her brief report. I was wanting to talk about how you're paying attention to some of the legal issues, especially if you're going to take on training tenants to deliver, I can never say the word, Naloxone, the drug, the anti-drug, and as well, you know, how are you responding to tenants who have flagged, and you yourself have found that there's a disconnect between where the service is happening and where the needs are. So thank you. Unless you have anything else to add, Nadia, in terms of timelines, that would be great.
I would say we are planning to meet with the Chief Medical Officer at the end of the month. We've already started preliminary discussions with Toronto Public Health in terms of whether we would have to be a direct distributor or whether we could partner for them to support that, which if we were to take that route, we could move a lot more quickly. If we are a direct distributor, we'd want to outline the concerns, risks, and considerations for the committee before we move forward with that. And so if the intent is for us to be able to do that, we will bring a detailed report in the fall to speak to what's required related to that. We'll have clarity, I would say, by the end of the month in terms of what direction we'll be pursuing.
So at our next meeting, we'll have a sense of which direction we're going with this.
Through the chair, I don't think we'll be able to have a formal written report in July, given the tight timelines, but we will certainly be able to bring something back early fall and maybe give a briefing note in between meetings to the committee if necessary. But I could give a verbal update at the July meeting if that's helpful.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. Okay. It doesn't have to be just in terms of how the process is going. So
sure.
We keep this on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the committee members? Okay, I guess I have a couple, given that this came from me originally. Yeah, I am also concerned about timelines and doing this quickly. And Lorna, I agree with everything you said in your deputation. And Miguel, some of what you said in terms of naloxone only working in some cases, and I know it's an issue, but unfortunately we at TCHC can't solve all of the issues that are around drugs at this point. I know others are trying to do it, and you know, drug testing is obviously a way of doing it, but that's you know, that's sparse as well in terms of resources. I'm sure you know that. My concern, Natty, would be, again, timelines. And I know that you've certainly, as the report indicates, taken the concern seriously. You've looked at the gaps where the real issues lay in terms of overdose fatalities and whatever. And I know that there have been, I don't have an exact number, but I know there have been a number of overdoses already this year on TCHC property. And so, as I said last meeting, you know, we're talking people's lives here. And I understand the difficulty in terms of the distribution issue. And I think that certainly from what I understand, partnering, if at all possible, with Toronto Public Health is key. I know Toronto Public Health does provide naloxone or assist others in getting naloxone. And also, it's my understanding, and I could be wrong, but I do think that there are people at Toronto Public Health, as it is a public health issue, who are available to meet with tenant staff, whomever, want to know more about the issue and how to administer it. And again, there's some good suggestions in the report about what can be done generally. I guess for me, and from what I heard from our deputy and others, the real issue here is timeline. And I think that given that the meeting with Toronto Public Health is near the end of this month, that it's not unreasonable to ask for it. It doesn't have to be a full report, but as Debbie said, to ask for a response to come back to this committee at the next Tenant Services, this committee, Tenant Services, as to where we are. Because if we do have an answer with regard to the distribution issue, that means we can move a lot faster and get going. And if not, it's unfortunate, but maybe there's some other workarounds, who knows. But I would really urge staff to do whatever they can to get some answers if there are other meetings that are necessary with others in the community or partners or whatever. And again, you know, more partnerships might well assist as well, I would think, in terms of what we do, because there are lots of organizations out there. And when I did the East tour, for example, I was very impressed by the number of organizations who were providing not just naloxone, but other harm reduction supplies, et cetera. There were a lot of them, and whether they were mobile units or using a room in actual buildings. So I think there's more we could be done in the partnership area too. So given that no one else was asking other questions, I would ask that the motion, in fact, indicate that that we've received the update on availability of naloxone in TCHC communities for the committee's information today, but that we have a further update at the next TSC meeting, which I believe is July 17th. I could have the exact date wrong, but it's at the next. Am I right? In July. It's in July to address some of the issues that have been raised today, and it doesn't have to be a full written report, but certainly an update so we know where we stand. Because I think it's every day could be a life lost, and we don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
So could I have someone who might move my amended motion? Thank you, Debbie. Yes, moving in. A seconder? Okay, Dan, do you have, were we able to get the, all right, all in favor? Sorry, Uba. She's just on screen. Oh, Uba, sorry. Uba, you have your hand up? I can't.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. No, I just have a quick question.
Sorry.
It's great to have the naloxone and the harm reduction safe sites and what have you. I personally saw some agency partner who is a health partner, and in the bathroom there were a lot of needles all over the place. So while we make sure we save lives and we provide all this necessary and needed support, how do we also ensure the safety of others? Because I was extremely shocked. In that bathroom, there was also an area where new mothers change diapers for their kids, and I'm like, this could be a disaster if a kid catch an open needle and what have you. So how do you ensure, while we're providing this amazing support, safety is also in place?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think that's key as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, having heard Uba, and Uba, I apologize. I didn't realize you were on because the screen isn't showing it. So great.
No worries. No worries. Thanks.
Okay, super. All right then. Back to, I think I already had a mover and seconder. Did I? We had a mover, not a seconder yet. Would someone second my motion? Shall I say it again? Or do you?
I can second.
You're seconding it?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. All in favor? All right. So moved then. Thank you. All right. Next then is the item number D, which is TCH's Q1 2026 in operational performance measures. And we do have some deputants on that. And the first one, we have a verbal and written deputation from one individual. That's Nicole Corrado. Is Nicole here?
Yes. Hello. I was going to say, I think it's incredibly sad that Toronto Community Housing Corporation uses cruel methods for her rodent control. The 16% reduction in mouse complaints is not attributable to the use of poisons, glue traps, or kill traps, because they every mouse kill will leave room for another one to replace them. I would highly recommend that Toronto Community Housing Corporation take a compassionate approach to animal management, including the management of mice, and utilize companies that use one-way doors and remove attractants and actually fix the holes. Because the real problem is not the animals; it's the access points and the garbage everywhere that's causing the issues. So it's sad, actually damaging to people's mental health to find an animal trapped in glue, trying to injure themselves, trying to get out of a glue trap, or finding an animal similarly in a body grip trap, or to have animals be poisoned. And the animals take the poison out of the boxes and they move the poison around the building. It does not stay in the box. So the animals, and they carry the poisons in their bodies, which affect other animals who eat them. Plus, it thins the blood, so it makes it easier for bed bugs and fleas and ticks and mites to bite the animals, making them more prone to mange. So then that affects people's health as well. So it's a real problem. If you want to have a healthy environment, please only use humane methods that do not harm the animals, such as exclusion and removing attractant.
That
I don't know if you
Nicole, you're breaking up, so it's hard to. Yeah, I think we may have just, I don't know if we've lost her, but. I think we got the gist. Yeah, we did. All right, I'm just going to ask committee members if there are any questions of the deputant.
Were you able to hear me? What I was, it's very unfortunate that.
I think we're having some technical difficulties here with Nicole. Nicole, I'm assuming that you had finished your deputation?
Well, yeah, I could just summarize what I was trying to say. I would like Toronto Community Housing Corporation to switch from using cruel methods of pest control like poisons, glue traps, and body gripping traps to switch for mouse management and the management of other animals to switch to humane methods like one-way doors, closing up holes, and removing attractants, because that's healthier for everybody, including the human tenants. It's not good to be having sick and injured animals everywhere.
Thank you, Nicole. I think we have the gist of it. Unfortunately, you are breaking up a bit, so it's difficult, but all right. But we appreciate it. And I know you've also put in a written deputation as well. Thank you. I did ask, but I'll ask again, any questions of Nicole from committee members? No? All right, then Nadia, I believe you were going to do a report, presentation.
I will do a short verbal update. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So there are a few areas I'd like to highlight in the Q4 performance data report. The portfolio vacancy rate has risen slightly from 1.67% to 1.73%, which continues to be well within the 2% target. We're continuing to watch this and target a push for as low a vacancy rate as possible going into 2026. Residential arrears grew by $600,000 in Q1, but it is notable that that increase is driven primarily by RGI households, something we're working to manage through additional training and support to staff, included staff involved in the arrears collection process. The trend of market arrears rising in previous quarters has shifted into the negative, with market arrears decreasing by $400,000 last quarter. This is good news, and it is driven by our work to bring households who lost eligibility due to missing paperwork back into compliance and reverse their arrears. Client care performance also remained stable in Q1, maintaining the service recovery achieved through the end of last year. My team and I are happy to take any questions from the committee on the report.
Dan, we'll start with you.
I have a few.
Okay.
On the arrears management, first of all, I think that there's a math error here. Perhaps you can help straighten me out. I'm told that the total amount arrears is 35.8, and that there's several components of that. RGI 17.1, RGI parking 2.3, market rental arrears 9.8, and commercial 1.1. That doesn't add up to 35.8. Can you?
So through the chair, happy to answer the question, and I'll throw it to Lindsay Viets, Director of Operational Planning and Program Services, to elaborate. So we distinguish between total arrears as well as rent and parking arrears. So there's a bit of a distinction in how we report on it. So I'll have Lindsay speak to the specifics.
Thank you. Through the chair. Nadia is correct. This report and the numbers you're referencing speak to rent and parking arrears, which are the arrears that the operations team actively works on and work to collect ultimately through the landlord-tenant board. So there's a few other buckets of arrears that are uncollectible at the landlord-tenant board, but they remain on our books, so we record them. The main area where you see those uncollectible arrears from the LTB are where we have expired orders. So we've had an order to evict, but we haven't enforced that order there's a number of reasons why that would happen. Often we're continuing to work with the tenant, or we feel we can preserve the tenancy and we don't need to evict. Those arrears become uncollectible at the LTB. And then the other main reason is when tenants have had a discharged bankruptcy, those arrears, we cannot legally collect those arrears, so we track them separately.
Okay. I don't know if you could perhaps next time explain that within the report, because I didn't want to do a gotcha, but it didn't seem to add up to me. I do have a couple questions specifically on market rent arrears. Of that 17, the number again, 9.8 million, how much of that is attributable to people who've lost subsidy because they haven't done the paperwork that's necessary under the Act? And presumably, not only would there be attention paid to that, but then the rest of it would be people who've just simply maybe fallen in hard times or whatever, and they would receive the same attention from staff and eventually from the Commissioner of Housing, would they not, in order to try to fix that problem? Seemed to me, just as a general milestone, is a little high on an amount more than I would have expected to see. So first of all, how much of it that is people have lost subsidy and fallen behind?
Through the chair, thank you. That's an excellent question. I don't have that exact data at my fingertips, certainly, but I can pull it, and it's something that I think it's a good breakdown that we can include in the report going forward, because I think it's an important metric, that separation between tenants whose market arrears are from a loss of eligibility versus tenants who are fundamentally a market tenant from the get-go. What I can say is that all of those tenants, whether they're market or RGI, they go through the same arrears collection process, and they receive the same support from the Office of the Commissioner of Housing Equity and from our own staff. And certainly when, I know in particular, when OJ gets a file that has market arrears as a result of loss of eligibility, their primary focus in working with that tenant is to get them back into eligibility, because that will largely address the arrears. So that's always the goal when we're dealing with a loss of eligibility file.
Let's say a person was removed from subsidy for 4 or 5 months, and then the correction was made, but during those 4 or 5 months, they were required to pay market rent. But they couldn't make ends meet, so they didn't pay it. So that would show as still some form of arrears on subsidy or on market.
So during those 5 months, while the loss of eligibility was on the books, those arrears would show under market arrears. What happens when we are able to rectify a loss of eligibility situation? So we've worked with those households, that household over the 5 months. We are able to reverse the loss, and that allows us to also reverse those arrears associated with the loss. In the majority of each case is different, but in the majority of cases, that is what happens. Our service manager gives us a great deal of latitude when the loss of eligibility is related to a non-return of documents, which is the vast majority of loss of eligibility, when they haven't returned all the documents that we need to confirm their eligibility. And so we are able to reverse those arrears. They are removed. They're not true arrears anymore. And that tenant, if they've continued to pay their base RGI rent through that time period, then they wouldn't be in arrears anymore.
Would you ballpark, or are we talking of that 9.8 million? Is that more than half of that attributed to this, or less? Do you want to give me a ballpark, or without me holding you to the
I could ballpark it to say it's at least 50%, but I can get the exact number.
And what would be an example of a commercial arrears happening? I mean, we rent commercial space. I noticed like in Regent Park, you've got some, is that pretty much people going out of business happen, and then of course they stop paying rent?
Yes, that's essentially correct. We, in our commercial portfolio, if we have a tenant who's fallen behind in rent, or that this is how this arrears has been calculated.
Right. I think my last question is something I disagree with the statement of what's an acceptable vacancy rate. I personally think it should be much lower. But first of all, we're pointed out that there are something like 2,000 non-rentable units. First of all, can you confirm that's not included in the vacancy rate, though, is it?
Through the chair, non-rentable vacant units are not included in the vacancy rate. You're correct.
Okay, it's showing up in the report, and it could. I did some amateur, and if I put 728 into my computer, and I came up with pretty close to what you got, but I couldn't estimate exact amount of units. The non-rentable units, I mean, are they total write-off forever and ever, or these are ones that we're going to fix up and hopefully rent to somebody at some point in time, or find some other good use for it?
So through the chair, the non-rentable vacant units oftentimes flow through into the system. So you'll notice that a big chunk of those units are for revitalization purposes. So they may take units offline to ensure we have units ready for the relocation process. The minute that that's concluded, the units come back online and we put them through the centralized wait list or through to transfers or whatever the case may be. So the intent is always to move units from the non-rentable category back into the system. The reason why the number tends to stay relatively stable is because as we bring units offline, so there might be another fire incident or a unit remediation process in place, we also bring units back online. So it happens frequently where we'll take a unit offline, but we'll also put a unit back online. So the commitment is always to get as many units back into the system as possible. I will say related to the 2% vacancy rate, it's below industry standards. It's something that we've established with the city, and we've also maintained below that 2%. It does include units that are in different states of the process. So we'll never get to 0% because of attrition and tenants moving out. Oftentimes we have to do quite a bit of work to get the unit back up to standard. It also includes the administrative period with the city where somebody's bidding on a unit. So it's not to suggest these units aren't being processed. It's just different steps of the process.
I understand the answer and I understand the numbers. I'll continue to be a bit of a nag on this one. I really would like to see more units occupied. That's our mandate, is to house people. So I don't accept applying our numbers to the private sector. As a whole different ball game, and don't get me started. But I know I can only express an opinion. I want it lower. I can't pass a policy. You must get it lower. But I expressed my opinion on that. I now understand the facts better. Thank you.
Yeah, and I agree with you. We are definitely committed to getting the number as low as possible. We're starting to see some better results going into Q2. There's also some ebbs and flows in terms of the use of units for transfers, emergency transfers, et cetera. So we always need to keep a certain number of units in the system to ensure that we're able to process other things. But certainly, I think our commitment is to get the number as low as possible as well.
400 would be a good target, and 700.
Anything further, Dan? Anything further? Anything further? No? All right. What about other committee members? Any questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question, Mary.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Nadia, is this where I can ask about transfers?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay, cool. I saw the crisis transfer, and as I always mention, I think it's a good idea. And I was wondering if perhaps you or Shane, one of you, can reach out to the city and ask them to merge the crisis transfer policy with the SPP. The SPP, those who might not familiar with, is special priority for client who's facing domestic violence and human trafficking, and it's with access to housing, and that person gets priority. They come on top of the wait list. And what will happen if we merge the two priority is it's going to expedite the process for our client tenants, but also it will give our tenants more options. Instead only be on the wait list with TCHC, they will also be on the wait list externally with co-ops, private nonprofit, TCHC, and rent supplement. So I really and truly think we should reach out to the city and ask them to merge the two priority, which will extremely benefit our tenants. The other thing that I just want to mention is we talked about this, I think, a year ago, a couple of years ago. I don't remember exactly. And when TCHC client faces safety issue and they need to relocate right away, sometimes they need to go to a hotel. And I can imagine, based on budget, I don't think the TCHC can put everyone in a hotel. So at that time, we talked about reserving a few units for to transfer people, the same way that we hold units for when we're doing revitalization. But we also talked about specifically designing 1 or 2 units. So when someone is fleeing for safety, if we cannot afford to put them in a hotel, we can put those family in there while we transferring them or placing them in a better and safer situation. So that's it. Thank you.
So through the chair, I'm happy to comment on the comments. So we have reached out to the city on more than one occasion. At this time, the city has declined combining the lists. So we continue to manage our transfer program internally. With respect to managing the transfer program, we have established a process to take some units offline as suggested by yourself and other stakeholders when we did the consultation process. So I'll have Lindsay expand on that and potentially expand on the perspective of the city at this point.
Through the chair, echoing what Nadia said in terms of the city, local priorities for the centralized waiting list are set by City Council, and it's not something that, to my understanding, they're opening up at this time. And with respect to the priority transfer waiting list, we do have quite a number of units that we're able to keep offline in the non-rentable category, to throw back to Dan's question. And that allows us to ensure that we are maximizing those units for as many folks who are in crisis and who need a priority transfer as possible. So it allows us to offer a single unit multiple times. Sometimes it doesn't work for the first person, so we can continue to offer it without having it impact operational vacancy management in the regions.
Anything further, Uba? Did that assist?
Not that, no, they both explained very well. Thank you very much. It's just sad to see the city declining this, and this is not up to TCHC. I'm sure if it's up to TCHC, they would have combined the two priority. But I'll continue to advocate, and if I have to, I'll reach out to the city myself and see what can be done. But I think people will benefit if we merge the two policy together. All right, thank you.
Thank you. I just had one question. It also has to deal with transfers. looks like the numbers were quite high in terms of waiting for a transfer. And I'm just in what situations, firstly, to step back, where you actually decline transfers? Is there a certain sort of number of reasons that are as to why you would not allow a transfer as opposed to in situations where you would? And then in those situations, particularly where it is something like fleeing domestic violence or a crisis situation, how long are people generally having to wait? So it's several-fold, my question, but yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for the question, Chair. So there are long wait times associated with transfers. Each individual transfer is considered on its own set of circumstances, and we can sometimes have quite restrictive criteria associated with an individual household, whether it be for safety or for accommodation purposes. Those are the two main buckets of why we transfer folks. Their safety, their health and safety is at risk, or they have a human rights-based accommodation need that can only be addressed through a transfer. We always try to accommodate those needs in unit when we can, but sometimes, for example, stairs in a unit, there's no way around it, right? And so because of some of those significant restrictions associated with individual files, folks can wait a long time until a unit comes. That's where we're subject to the vacancies that come up, and somebody may only have a handful of communities that they can safely transfer to. And so, especially if it's a larger unit size, if it's a 3 or 4 or plus bedroom unit, we really are waiting quite some time for folks, and we move as quickly as we can. We certainly address the list chronologically, so the folks who've been waiting the longest would have, access to units, right? So we work through it chronologically. The other thing I will say, you mentioned victims of domestic violence. So that is a separate program. It is a provincially mandated priority, and it is managed through the eligibility for that program is managed through the City of Toronto's Access to Housing. And those households that are approved, it's called SPP, Special Priority Program, and it includes victims of human trafficking as well. They do tend to move a little bit quicker because their priority is quite a bit higher. And then I think there was one other, you wanted to know why we would decline. Yeah, so we have a set of criteria in our transfer policy and procedure, and that articulates what we're looking at. It's people have to demonstrate that their safety's at risk, or they have a human rights protected ground, like I said, that can only be accommodated by a transfer.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else? No? All right, then I'm wondering, Anna, if I could have someone move that we receive the Q1 2026 Operational Performance Measures Report for the committee's information. Anybody?
I can move.
Okay. Uba, I think that was you, and a seconder then was Debbie, right? All in favor? Okay, moved. Okay. All right, then, we can move on to the tenant engagement refresh update. And we have a number of deputations on this one. And starting with Miguel, you're up again, Miguel. Okay. All right.
So I will, microphone, okay, there you go. I will be talking about the tenant engagement on page 5. Next steps, bullet point number 6, to implement the community garden policy, procedure, and supporting system. That is the title of my deputation. On this deputation, I want to say that I am an indoor garden person. Since the legalization of marijuana, I've been allowed to have up to 4 cannabis plants in my balcony because I require medical cannabis for anxiety, depression, etc., etc. So I never have any interest about learning about the communal space of gardening at 220 Oak Street. Here is an aerial view from top to bottom of the lot of gardens for community residents. And at this meeting, 220 Oak Street, we were giving an update about the garden policy for all the residents. I'm speaking as a resident who has no interest right now in having a plot. I am speaking about the necessity to remind Toronto Housing about the promise to help our disabled community to enjoy the pleasures of gardening by having rice plots like the one on the graphics. In 2020, we were promised to have this type of plots to help our residents who are disabled. It's 2026, fantastic. You have a brand new policy, but what are we gonna do to help those residents who are motivated to have a gardening space, but they are in a wheelchair? So if you wanna be proactive, if you wanna be inclusive of residents who are disabled, raised plots will help them to achieve that. But we don't have it because our capital project is limited for this year. Only $10 million was approved. So I'm asking you guys if you can squeeze a little bit more money so we can have these plots in place for our disabled. When I'm speaking about the gardens. Now, there is a bit of a conflict here because apparently the new policy is excluding other members of the community. Since I moved into 220 Oak Street Co-op, and in our community have had amazing collaboration, amazing cooperation, even we share community gardening spaces. But this policy passed on February 17 of this year. It is excluding members of Oak Street Co-op. The community service coordinator for our building is aware that this collaboration with residents of Oak Street Co-op has been going on for almost 20 years or more. It appears that there was a failure of communications to alert the residents of Oak Street Co-op to have a say in the new policy that you guys have in place, which is also a bit added on issues related to insurance coverage, which is new for us. So I'm going to stop there because it is, as I said, I'm an indoor gardener. My plants are approved by the government to enjoy my unit. So I will.
Thank you very much. Any questions of Miguel, committee members? No, all right. Then the next deputant is, and I hope I'm pronouncing this properly, Gita Hashemi. Good afternoon. Oh, I guess it's not, no, it's not afternoon, it's still morning, yes. Just feels like afternoon, yes.
And staff. I'm a little nervous. I'm an artist and usually don't attend this kind of meeting, so please bear with me.
Don't be nervous, we're all very friendly.
I appreciate the work that you all do. I'm a member, I'm a resident at Oak Street Housing Co-op, which is adjacent to 220 Oak Street building, TCHC building, and have been a member of the community garden that Miguel was just talking about. So I'm here today to advocate on behalf of the gardeners who are members of the Oak Street Housing Co-op, and provide you with a little bit of context and history about this community garden. I moved into the neighborhood 20 years ago. And when I moved, the garden was about 2, 3 years old. It was a wasteland that the tenants at TCHC, a group of tenants at TCHC, and some members, residents of the Oak Street Housing Co-op, collaboratively took over and reclaimed and turned into a garden. Since its very start, it has been a community initiative. It was taken over by TCHC to manage some years after it started, and TCHC became more involved when a group of us, myself included, wrote a grant for the city got a city grant to improve the garden, and part of the improvement plan was in fact to make the garden accessible. At that time, because we weren't a registered entity and could not receive the grant directly, the money was directed into TCHC account, and 220, I'm sorry, I don't know what the management structure is, but they took over the process of renovating the garden, and since then they have been at an arm's length managing the garden, but the garden has always been run by volunteer members, garden ambassadors that are members of residents at 220 Oak Street, and as well by some residents of the co-op building. Now, the policy that Miguel was talking about apparently was passed sometime in February of this year. It was only communicated to us on the 29th of May, so some months after. It would be interesting to know how many people in this room are gardeners. If you garden, you know that traditionally we start gardening on Victoria Day weekend in Canada, and at least in Ontario. And so it was after we had already started the season that we were told that, well, the new policy does not allow co-op residents to participate in the garden. I wanted to say that this garden, like over the years, this garden has been really important, as I think Mr. You mentioned, I'm sorry, I blank out on your name. You mentioned, connecting community and safety of the neighborhood. This garden has been really key in connecting the two adjacent buildings. There have been friendships. We have had barbecues together. We support each other. We, share the harvest. We share the seed. We share knowledge. It's been really important part of the community collaboration and the neighborhood spirit in the area. And I really am very concerned that by leaving out the co-op members from the garden, then you are going to actually set up a wall between, these two communities, which we worked really hard for well over 20 years to actually bring down, to create a community in that area. I wanted to say that there is ample space in that garden. There is ample land to expand it if there is a need for that. But I'd like you to know I've submitted a written deputation with some numbers, so hopefully people will look at it. But at the present moment, there is at least 11 plots that are not being used. So the reason for the change is not because, there are too many of us in the garden and you need it for TCHC residents. The change has happened without consultation with us and without adequate information. And I really think that this is going to have very negative impact on the entire neighborhood and on the health of the garden itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the deputant by committee members? No? All right, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, next deputant is Colleen Slater. Now, she wasn't on the list before, but I think I'm certainly prepared to. She's not online. Oh, okay. She's not online or here in person? No? Colleen Slater?
I believe she's online.
Apparently not. No. Okay. I'll also just note for the record that there are written deputations by Chad Hamad, Jacqueline Yu, Gita, who mentioned hers as well, and Elizabeth Cunningham. All right, then. I'm going to turn this over to Nadia.
So through the chair, just to comment, and then I'll throw it to Pablo related to the deputation, the deputations. I would caution the committee to think about our gardening policy primarily for TCHC tenants, and you could appreciate in communities where there might be more mobilized non-TCHC tenants, creating a bit of a slippery slope to have them access community gardens on our sites is why that was put into the policy to begin with. With respect to this individual situation, we are working to mitigate the concerns from the residents, but I would say more broadly, we would want to be really careful about changing the clause that requires the use of the garden to be open to the public, because I think that would create other problems in other communities for us. With respect to the report, Engage Together is now in its second year of implementation, and Q1 2026 has been off to a strong start. Tenant circles significantly exceeded the quarterly target. 147 meetings were held across 61% of eligible communities, well above the 25% Q1 benchmark, engaging over 1,000 tenants and 62 youth. All 9 district councils held their inaugural meetings this quarter with a 67% attendance rate, bringing 116 tenant leaders together for the first time under the new structure. The Tenant Advisory Committee maintained full representation and was consulted on several key initiatives, including the Community Safety and Wellbeing Strategy, upcoming fire code changes, LIFT funding, and LIFT funding. LIFT funding is underway with 36 projects approved in Q1, and spending is expected to accelerate in Q2 as communities finalize their local priorities through the tenant circle process. The priority for 2026 is stabilizing the model through strengthened operational procedures, improved data accuracy, and clear, consistent tenant-facing communications. I'll turn it over to Pablo to say a couple of words.
Good morning, through the chair. So as Nadia outlined, we are in the second year of implementation, although the implementation is really just about 1 year in, since we really started implementing in March 2025, so we're a little bit over a year. And the progress is notable. So obviously, kind of given the cadence of reporting, we are looking at Q1 information. However, I can say that up to today, we've had 232 tenant circle meetings in 79% of our communities, 1,800 participants. We just went through a process of soliciting new tenant council members for some of the vacancies after the tenant elections that we had in the fall. We've had 40 new people come forward. So now we have 86% of our tenants being represented through tenant councils, and tenant councils sessions are currently underway. We have a tenant council meeting tonight, for example, in Gordon Ridge. Lift is been increased to $16 per bedroom with the consolidation of the former tenant action fund with the lift. So, and to date, we've had about 10% of the funds being used. But this is obviously heading into summer where we have significant increases in the expenditures for summer barbecues, other activities like that, as well as community gardens. So I'll speak a little bit to that. With regards to the community gardens post-approval, which happened in Q1 in February, we've had 3 virtual and 1 in-person information sessions, as well as staff training for CSCs and building staff from all 9 districts. We've also had tenant-led presentations at the 3 TCATs and production of community garden manual, which we've had distribution of about 400 copies. Right now we have 79 gardens across the portfolios, and we put the information online to start getting the applications and agreements in so that we can be in compliance with the policy. With regards to the garden that the deputants spoke to, we've been kind of speaking online. We're familiar with the issue before today. So we are looking at a solution to apply to this year, given that folks have already started to garden at that location. We have have 28 plots, of which there are currently 12 tenants from 220 Oak that are gardeners. However, we do have lots of interest from surrounding properties. We have a lot of applications that have been submitted already for local gardens at 1 and 175 Oak, as well as 110 and 150 River. So per the policies, which stipulate that the gardens are supposed to be facilitated for TCHC tenants, we also do permit TCHC tenants to be able to garden at other areas if they are on a waiting list in their own location. So, but again, understanding that we, that there's going to be some time for getting all of the compliance across all of our gardens, we will touch base with the deputants and folks at the co-op in order to find a solution for this year.
Okay. Any questions by members of the committee, of Nadia or staff? No? Okay. I guess my only concern would be, in terms of the deputants in the garden at Oak Street, and I understand, obviously, it's a slippery slope, and we're here to deal with our TCHC tenants, but in this particular case, it would appear that there's a history that might not be there in other buildings, and not only is there a history, more importantly, I'm hearing there's a community, and there's a community that involves not just TCHC tenants, but the people at the residents at the Oak Street Co-op, and it's the community involves both, and I would think that that's important, that our tenants become part of larger communities and aren't just isolated, and that may not be quite the right word to use, but here we have an opportunity where residents of both the co-op and one of our buildings have worked together, it would appear, for many years, and not only garden together, but have barbecues and other social events. And I guess it's a rhetorical question, but isn't that something we would want to support in some of our communities? At the same time, understanding that our obligation is to our own tenants, but this is, I think this is perhaps a bit different in that there appears to have been a long history, not only in terms of individuals gardening, but also in terms of having the resources to make this community garden what it is. So that would be a concern of mine. And I query how many other examples like this there might be. And sometimes, given different situations, one has to make exceptions. So that would be my point. And they're clearly very passionate about what they do. So yes, I'm sorry. I see Marcel does have his hand up, so I should go to him.
Thank you. I do share a little bit of your viewpoint, but I also see where Nadia is coming from. It is a slippery slope because sometimes, things really don't work out the way they were intended to work out. So I do encourage everyone to try and find a reasonable solution, but we always have to bear in mind that, the tenants of TCHC have to be the priority of everything. That's it. Thank you.
So through the chair, we are committed. So thank you, Director Charlebois and Chair. We are committed to working with the local group as well as the residents of 220 Oak to come up with a customized local solution. We're not interested in reopening the policy in relation to this because I think it's really important, as Director Charlebois points out, to prioritize TCHC tenants, and we want to ensure that our amenities are for TCHC tenants. But certainly at a local level, Pablo and the Central Regional team are committed to follow-up conversations to find a more reasonable solution here, if possible.
There are always exceptions, I think, to general rules, and perhaps this is one of them. But sorry, go ahead, Dan, go ahead.
Just to pull a phrase out of the blue, could we not grandfather what's happening in this particular situation, notwithstanding what the final official policy would be? Does that solve the problem? You're not committing to it as a precedent. You're committing to it as a grandfathering.
So through the chair, I'm happy to explore that with the team as a possible solution.
So I think that
How
was,
I got my license.
I think that was actually raised in one of the written deputations as well, that one of this was suggested, and that may be the answer in this case, because clearly they've been doing this for a long time, and I don't know if there are any other situations. There may or may not be, but grandfathering, and I think might make some sense. So, okay, I see some people there nodding at the back. Okay, so in any event, I guess all I'd say is that we urge you to look at it, and I'm being told you are, and that particularly, as Dan has said, the grandfather exception might just be appropriate in this case. Okay. All right, with anything else? Marcel, do you still have your hand up, or is that from before? Before? Okay. All right, thank you. All right, then, any other questions from the committee, comments? All right, then can I ask that, and, you know, well, Miguel, I think I'm just...
Most importantly, if we want to increase the number of TCHC tenants in the gardening, keep in mind those disabled people. They need those high-rise plots so they can reach and do their gardening. Please have consideration. Thank you.
No, all of the comments that were made in the deputations are heard, and where possible, obviously, we do our best to accommodate. Okay, then I'm going to ask for just that a motion that this report has been received as information, I think only, right? All right, a mover, a seconder? Dan, move. Seconder? Debbie, all in favor? Okay, great, thank you. So I know you will be hearing further, okay. All right. Okay, then moving on to, moving to the next item, which is the, I'm just looking for it here, the tenant survey. Okay, item 7, and that's being held. And we have one deputation, and I see she's already ready. Catherine, okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and to the committee. I promise this is my last deputation for the day. Again. So I wanted to talk about the tenant survey. You know, it's actually become stagnant. We are paying a lot of money to get predictable results. You know, not much changes, increases, decreases. We can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different outcome. I understand it's standard practice to group somewhat satisfied with satisfied. What does this say about our service standards? You know, consistently we see throughout the survey, somewhat satisfied and satisfied statistics are neck and neck. That is unacceptable. There's no somewhat paychecks. We expect our employees to deliver, and we want our tenants to be satisfied with those services, not somewhat satisfied. With the current contract with Forum Research coming to an end, this is an ideal opportunity. Start fresh with a brand new vendor, and let's go out of our comfort zone and change the questions in a way that better reflect tenant satisfaction in today's environment. Tenants have been telling you for 20 years what matters most to them. One-on-one support for tenants has not improved. Well, there's no surprise there. Toronto Housing created the entire service delivery strategy to improve tenant-facing services, and we know why it has not improved, because the service hubs that are supposed to be providing those tenant-facing services are closed. A tenant can't just go down to the office and ask for help. If they're lucky, they might be able to get an appointment. Anything over 50% in the survey is somehow viewed as positive. Is that what we're aiming for? We changed the entire safety strategy to focus on crime and vandalism. And it's certainly important to everyone, But tenants want timely service response. They want boots on the ground. Seeing special constables gives a perception of safety. Today, if you see a CSU special officer on site, something really bad must have happened. They don't even acknowledge tenants. Most important issues don't change much year over year. So why are we not seeing some reports that address those specific tenant concerns that we hear about that are part of their daily lives? Things like elevators, parking enforcement, noise complaints, antisocial behaviors, drug activity. We're not having those conversations. When we look at the quarterly operations report, we don't talk about the actual calls for service. We used to, what they were about. And we need to understand the most significant tenant requests and challenges that our tenants are having today. We know CSU has been laser focused on the VRP communities, and tenants who live in those communities who answered this survey would actually distort the overall results on their satisfaction level because they had something none of the rest of our communities had. Dedicated CSU 24/7 on site. More than half of the tenants who responded are not interested in tenant engagement. That's an important discussion. I'm sure Pablo's losing sleep over that. We need to ask ourselves, why is that? Should we be doing something different? We did not foresee the last restructured service delivery model had unintended consequences of actually distancing site staff from tenants. There was a time tenants could go downstairs and speak to their superintendent, but now, safely behind a lock on site today. Call center, or they'll just not bother with their request. So much for tenant-facing services. It is evident on the customer service driver analysis that top primary focus of improvement are staff response times to tenant inquiries, availability of local building staff for one-on-one support, and lastly, service provided at the community safety unit. So to this end, I have a recommendation. As in the past, that the Tenant Services Committee be involved in the next iteration of the tenant survey. The questions to be presented publicly in advance to make sure we are asking the right questions to measure our lived experience of our tenants. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee, any questions of Catherine? No? Oh, no? All right. Thank you. I'm going to go then to, is it to Barbara on this item? Go ahead.
Thank you to the chair, and so thank you to the deputant. We appreciate the constructive feedback that you've provided, and certainly, as we pointed out in the report, with this being the last year that we did the survey with Forum, we will be looking at a refresh, and we'll have an opportunity to consider the many recommendations that were highlighted. At this time, I would like to turn it over to staff, Megan Nicholson and Lauren Blueberger, our director and manager, who will take us through a brief presentation.
Good morning. I think governance team, you're going to...
At a refresh, and we'll have an opportunity to consider the many recommendations that were highlighted. At this...
I think we've got a technical glitch here. Within a glitch.
Okay, let's try that again. Good morning, everyone. I'm Megan Nicholson, Director of Strategy and Data Intelligence, and I'm pleased to provide this overview of the 2025 tenant survey results. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge Lauren Bloomberger, Manager of Data Intelligence, and Aaron Bradford, a business analyst on the team. Both of them are here with us this morning. Lauren and Aaron played critical roles in coordinating the many months-long process to deliver the tenant survey with the vendor and also compiling our initial results. Next slide, please. The 2025 survey, which was sent to all TCHC households, was open for tenant responses from September 2025 until January 2026. The tenant survey is conducted every 2 years, and it's TCHC's most comprehensive feedback mechanism to hear from tenants and contains questions about all service areas. In 2025, we added new questions to the survey to better understand tenants' perceptions of safety, maintenance, and satisfaction with staff interactions. We want as many tenants as possible to participate in the survey, and it was promoted through many channels. Although we did see a reduction in the response rate from 2023, a response rate of 14% was achieved, and this is in range within the industry average of 10 to 15% for this type of survey. Next slide, please. In 2025, we continued to see tenants turning more to digital options to complete the survey, with 2/3 opting to use email or an SMS link. And tenants' overall satisfaction with TCHC stayed consistent from 2023 at 56%. For context, it's important to note that between 2021 and 2023, we saw significant increases in satisfaction across service areas, and in 2025, satisfaction rates were largely stable, with slight increases or decreases, often in the 1 to 2 percentage point range. Next slide, please. So before I go into detail on some more of the specific survey areas, what we can say in general about the results for 2025 is that the majority, or 56%, of tenants report that they are satisfied with TCHC overall. Tenant satisfaction with customer service has stayed steady over the past 2 years, and we've seen a modest increase of 2 to 3 percentage points in satisfaction with the client care center. In addition, tenants told us that financial help and food security support services would be most helpful to maintain their housing and manage daily life. Next slide, please. In the area of community safety, 75% of tenants felt that safety improved or remained the same in the past year. And in terms of how satisfied tenants are with their level of safety, there was a reduction of 2% to 44%. This is an area where we are conducting additional analysis to better understand what drives satisfaction with community safety. Next slide, please. Nearly half of tenants, or 48%, expressed that they are not interested in participating in tenant engagement opportunities. Among those who are interested, tenant circles was the most popular option. Men are typically more satisfied than women across TCHC service areas, and by a difference of 5% or less. However, women are more likely than men to identify support services that would help them maintain their housing and day-to-day life. Next slide, please. The next couple of slides cover some key areas for improvement that have been identified. First is the area of tenant sentiment. Although feeling respected by other tenants stays same as in 2023 at 58%, all other areas of tenant sentiment, which includes the sense of belonging, feeling welcome in common spaces, pride in community, pride in home, feeling respected by staff, and staff accountability decreased by 1 to 5 percentage points and ranged from 48 to 62% satisfaction. The Net Promoter Score remained the same as in 2023 and was -8, meaning that most tenants are not likely to recommend TCHC as a good place to live. Next slide, please. Younger tenants tend to be less satisfied than older tenants, and this can be by as much as 30%. Younger tenants are more concerned with criminal activity in their building, are more likely to want TCHC to prioritize responding to violent incidents and offering community crisis support after incidents occur. Next slide, please. So keeping in mind some of the areas for improvement that were identified in 2023, we note that the 3 areas of one-on-one support, staff support, safety, and youth satisfaction continue to be areas to focus on. We also know that the availability of one-to-one support and safety are areas that strongly drive tenants' overall satisfaction with TCHC. Next slide, please. In terms of how we're taking action on what we've heard from tenants, in some instances, there is already work underway that will focus on getting the word out to tenants about what is happening. Some feedback does require additional engagement with tenants so that we can better understand what actions would be the most impactful. And there's also an opportunity for us to get more actionable insights by doing deeper analysis of the tenant survey responses, as well as by combining these survey results with other data sets. Next slide, please. Based on the initial findings, we have also identified a number of areas for additional exploration. And as you can see from the list on this slide, these correspond with the areas for improvement previously identified. Next slide, please. A critical step in the tenant survey process is getting the results out to tenants, and our communication efforts will take place in 2 phases. The first one will begin this month with a rollout of the high-level trends, followed by a second phase that will begin in the fall, and that will emphasize TCHC's action plans to address what we've heard. And last slide, please. So before I wrap up today, and in keeping with the comments from our deputant as well as from Barbara, 2025 was the last, this was the 3rd of 3 survey cycles with our current vendor, and we're going to be undertaking work in 2026 to identify a new vendor to start the cycle in 2027. And as part of that, as the slide references, it's a really important opportunity for TCHC to look at opportunities to modernize the approach to how we hear from tenants. For example, ways to engage other than our one-off, very large, comprehensive survey. And I really appreciate the comment from the deputant encouraging direct tenant involvement in that process. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks for this morning, and I'm very happy to take any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you. Right. Are there questions from the committee members? Dan, you look like you are ready to go there. Okay. And then Debbie?
Oh, like Catherine, maybe not like Catherine, I'm one who's kind of skeptical about satisfaction surveys. Last week I cashed a check at the bank, and an hour later I'm being asked to say how satisfied I was with how they took my check and put it in the drawer. So I tend to ignore them mostly. That being said, this is one of the reasons I'm here is that my career has been working with tenants in the private sector, and frankly, they don't ask tenants how they feel. They don't care. If you don't like it, pack your bags. That's what the attitude boils down to. So that's why I do think it's important that we reach out. Sure, we could try different things and everything else, but just showing that we give a damn is a step in the right direction. And we'll take the slings and arrows from time to time about that. I did wonder, the participation rate was dropped, but I wondered how much the postal situation in the fall had to do with that, because I never got mine till it was, I think the last day it was supposed to be submitted. By the way, I thought it was too long. If that did affect. Also, the men and women comparison you make, my presumption is that there's a higher percentage of women living in TCHC than men. I don't know if that, but I imagine that was taken into account in the statistical thing. In fact, I was a little surprised by that, a couple of those findings. But So those are just my comments. So I certainly would want to see, and I know I've talked to Natty about a couple of ideas I've got even further on this form, is to show why TCHC, while managing old stock that needs millions of dollars of repairs and looking after people on a day-to-day basis, is doing, very, very well. And compared to the private sector, it's no comparison. So I think we need to keep it up in that direction, but take the criticisms where appropriate, and keep in touch with their tenants. Nobody is going to tell their relatives, oh yeah, you want to live in TCHC. Why? Because there's an underlying assumption that means you're a low-income person, and somehow that you need to go to a social housing unit. Everybody talks about the dream of home ownership. Well, that's not anything our people dream about. So those are a few of my comments. So I'm glad you did the survey. I think there was a problem because of the mailing. I talked to a couple of my neighbors. They were sort of in the same boat. So if you can confirm my suspicion on that, and continue from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, the timing of the Canada Post strike did absolutely coincide with our period for the survey and did negatively impact the response rate this time around. In order to try to mitigate that to the best of our ability, we did extend the survey period by a considerable margin. That's why the survey didn't close until January of 2026 this year. We did want to give tenants an opportunity to participate and recognize that many of those packages were held up in the mail. We did also work directly with our survey vendor in order to create an option for tenants to provide their email address and have the survey provided to them in the meantime so that they didn't have to wait for the arrival of the package. But admittedly, we do attribute a large degree of that drop in 2025 participation to the impact of the strike.
Debbie, am I correct? Sorry, are you, anything else? Debbie, did I see you had a hand up before?
Yeah, and then mentioned a number of things, and the response was fine. What are we going to do? I was surprised by the high number who are not interested in becoming more engaged, given our focus on tenant engagement. Why do you think that is, especially at the time when we've been rolling out the various tenant councils, meetings were happening for the first time? You'd think there would have been lots of buzz across communities about this, and so the survey would have reflected that. But it would be good to hear from staff. Why do they think there is this sense of disengagement in spite of the efforts?
Maybe I'll start and then ask if others want to chime in. I've worked in a number of different sort of government-oriented public service-facing organizations, and oftentimes what we'll say is that if services are provided well, tenants or clients, or depending on what sort of service you're looking at, just want to receive that service really well and don't necessarily want to engage with you beyond that, right? They want a good product, a good service, and then assuming there's no concerns, there's nothing further to discuss in a lot of cases. Now, obviously that's a generalization, that's not everyone. And we as an organization are trying to encourage folks to engage with us more. I think our new engagement model is doing a good job of, we're seeing much higher numbers of individuals engage with us on the ground. So when you look at the actual outcome, we're seeing more people participate than ever before in our engagement model. When you look at the survey and you ask anybody living in TCHC, do you want to engage more with the organization? I think what you're hearing is about half of folks are saying, no thanks, I'm good. I don't need any further engagement from you. I think that's a reasonable state of affairs, but we're still continuing to try to encourage more folks to participate, and we're seeing that play out in the actual results that we're having on the ground. I don't know if probably you want to say anything further about that.
Through the chair, yeah, I think our CEO captured it pretty perfectly. We are rolling out something new. We are inviting people into this system that we are developing as we're rolling it out, and we are having good results. But we know that there are gaps. We know that there's issues that we need to address in terms of trust and whatnot. And in general, there is a social climate where, volunteerism is down across, multiple sectors. Participation in elections, I think, has generally been down. This is something else. So we have some initiatives looking ahead towards the municipal elections to see if we can increase the participation of TCHC tenants in municipal elections. So as a whole, it is something that we have flagged, something that we're working on, and something that we hope to be able to continue to improve.
Thank you both.
Anything further? I just have one question. In terms of survey in the future and who gets picked to do it, are tenants involved, not so much in who gets picked, but in formulating any of the questions? Because it seems to me that that's a good place to start. What do you want to? Well, a lot of people will say they don't want to tell us anything, but there are a lot of other people who do want to tell us a lot of things, and particularly those who are dissatisfied. But fair enough. I mean, that's what we should be looking at. And it is concerning, not necessarily surprising, and there are all sorts of reasons for this, but to hear that, the tenants' pride in their community and sense of belonging and whatever is down, and they wouldn't recommend to people TCHC housing. Now, there are other factors as well. I know there's certain stigmas and that sort of thing as well, and as Dan pointed out, but still, that says to me that there is a fair amount of dissatisfaction, and it's unfortunate. I don't know what you do. I know surveys generally don't get a big response. So when you hear 20%, 14%, and I think I saw somewhere in the report that's a sort of standard average in any event for responses. But as I say, what about our tenants involved in formulating some of the questions and in talking about it?
To the chair, maybe I'll just start off and then Megan can jump in. For sure, there is value in hearing from tenants on the kinds of things that we should be evaluating. At the same time, we try to have an ability to compare progress and evaluate the effectiveness of the things we put in place. So that leads us to try and ask the same questions over a number of different surveys so that we have the good basis for comparability. But with this now taking us into the new period of a refresh and looking at how do we want to survey going forward, there is a new opportunity to determine, to get input from tenants going forward. And Megan, did you want to add?
Thanks, Barbara.
We're asking the bad questions. We keep asking them again and again. I mean, it's a comparator, but there may be other questions that would be best asked. Sorry.
Yeah, and just I think Barbara covered it in terms of the move to a new vendor and really taking that strategic step back and thinking about what we're trying to accomplish with the survey and pairing that with the best methodological approach to getting that information that we need. We definitely can take a much closer look at the ways in which tenants are engaged with us in that process.
You could ask tenants, what do you want to tell? What do you want to tell TCHC, your landlord? And you might get some interesting responses, which then could be reflected in a survey. Okay. Anything else? All right, then. I am going to ask for a motion that item 7, the tenant survey, the 2025 tenant survey, is received and is forwarded to the board for information. Dan, moving it. A seconder? Debbie, all in favor? Carried. Okay. Almost done. There's, in terms of other business, it's just something that I'd like to add to our work plan if I could. And I noted it wasn't, was the cooling. A report back on the cooling room situation and what was done this summer. I think it was really at the board, but it's also very much a TSC issue. And I didn't note it on work plan. So if we could add that to our work plan for probably October or November TSC meeting, because we have to have time, obviously, to compile the information and then get it together for that. So any difficulty with adding that in our fall work plan? Okay, I think we can just add it, and I'm not hearing any opposition. All right, if there is no other additional business, no? Okay, I think that we have finished our business in the public meeting, so I'm going to ask for a motion to end the public meeting. Dan, seconder? Abby, you'll second that, right? Okay. All in favor? Okay, thank you. All right, we'll just take a few-minute break while we then go into the in-camera meeting. And thank you all for attending today. I know it's gone on much longer, but I think it's been a useful meeting. Okay, and thank you to all the deputants who came. Good.